Technology Law Department. We have a really terrific presentation for you today, and we're hoping that's going to be dynamic and engaging, and we're hoping to hear from all of you as audience members as well, so we encourage participation as we kind of have a little bit of a voyeuristic view into this exciting group of panelists today to see how they interact and the different exciting programs that they're involved with. I have the honor of teeing up both the program today and the topic we're discussing, as well as the moderator, Frank Milone. So first to our topic, university resources as a catalyst for development and investment in new technology. So what the heck does that mean? Despite the continued tumultuous economy, we have a situation where university and research, licensing and startup activity remains really strong. On a nationwide basis last year, startups increased 3%, licensing and option agreements with startups increased 14%, total research and development spending increased 4% to $61 billion. We had a license income increase of 2.5% to $2.5 billion. So if you follow the news, you've seen that in this particular region, we're really poised to become a hotbed of activity in this area. And so today we've got panelists from UMass, from Yale, from UConn, talking about the different activities that they've been involved with. We've also got VC representation to talk about how they're plugging into what's been happening in the activity at these various campuses. Our moderator, Frank Milone, is uniquely situated to talk to us about this discussion today and guide us through it. Frank is one of the founding partners of the accounting firm of Fiandella, Milone, and La Saracena. Despite his youthful appearance, Frank has over 20 years of experience providing audit and advisory services to a host of companies. Now, no comments from the peanut gallery on Frank's age here, but we'll take guesses afterwards. The companies range from publicly traded companies to small startups, and they cover a whole host of industries ranging from technology companies through to consumer product and service companies. This is a topic that's near and dear to Frank's heart. And those of you that know him know that he has spearheaded activity by CVG in this area for numerous years on exactly these topics. He leads FML's significant efforts in this space, including their work mentoring early stage companies through sponsorship, satellite office space, and pro bono mentoring of Connecticut Innovation CTEC Technology Incubator at Science Park in New Haven, Connecticut. He is a huge supporter of the UConn Technology Incubator Program as a known resource and mentor to the participants in that program. And he also has been known for his mentoring for the Innovation Quest program at UConn, which is geared towards student-based entrepreneurship and the formation of companies. So without further ado, I welcome Frank Milone.
Thanks, Jackie. Oh, that was a nice introduction. Very nice. Thank you very much. So I want to welcome everyone today. As you might imagine, I'm excited. I love talking about this topic. And we have just a phenomenal panel today to really delve into a lot of the meaty discussions that are really, really in front and center in the news recently, and what the state is doing and the region is doing. And it's really an honor to have representation from all of the region, or some of the regional universities. And so instead of me introducing them, I'll tell you who's sitting around the table, and then I'll allow each of you to spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Let everyone know about what you're doing. Introduce yourself, and more importantly, introduce your programs. Introduce your universities, and let's set the table for what I hope to be a real vibrant discussion on some of the issues that we're facing. So we have sitting around the table representations from the University of Connecticut, Mary Holzclaw, Vice President of Economic Development at the University of Connecticut. We have Fred Reinhardt from UMass Amherst, Director of Commercial Ventures and Intellectual Property. We have Kim Miller from Yale University, Deputy Director of the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute, or YEI. It's a well-known program. And representing our venture capital perspective is Rob Bedigal. Rob is founder and managing partner of Elm Street Ventures, well-known in the New Haven area and in Connecticut and beyond. So thank you, first off, all of you, for dedicating the time to come Mary, let's start off with you.
Thank you. I'm indeed honored to talk to a group here about the exciting things that are happening at the University of Connecticut. We have just really invigorated a lot of the efforts that we're doing and expanding those. And I kind of say that we are very much a full service from discovery all the way through commercialization of technology and interesting ideas that are happening at the University of Connecticut. You heard about one of the areas, a couple areas that we're focusing on. One of those is entrepreneurship. And indeed is a good time to be talking to students, and we have a number of programs. One of those, Innovation Quest, which is a program which is funded by one of our alumnus, that helps companies through the business plan competition, and then also stays with them over a couple-year time period. And this would not be possible without a lot of our really engaged alumni like Frank and others who are mentors and who also are helping them find the resources that are necessary to take their ideas and their companies on. And so we're really beginning to do a lot more invigoration of our entrepreneurship program, not only for students, but I've been at UConn for about 9 months, and we get calls all the time from our faculty. They maybe have a business idea, and so we're really excited that we're going to be part of and have more resources coming to us here in the coming future as being one of the entrepreneur hubs coming from the state of from Connecticut and helping to fund that through DECD and Connecticut Innovations. So those are a few resources that we're putting together. And then many of you know the strong programs that we have with technology commercialization and our technology incubation programs at UConn. And so these are very invigorated now with all of the work that's been going on with Bioscience Connecticut and the resources and discoveries which we anticipate will be coming through that investment, as well as, I'm only supposed to talk 2 minutes, so I'll be quiet here, but as well as the really significant commitment that's been coming from industry. So in summary, it's a great time to be at UConn. They say the secret of a successful rain dance is timing, and I think a lot of things are coming together at UConn right now. We have one of the areas that's going to be a very significant ability to bring in new industry, to bring in new industrial partners is our technology park, which is going to be completed in 2015. So that's the 40,000-foot view, and I know that we're going to get down a little bit deeper into some of those specific programs as we go on. Thank you.
I'm Fred Reinhardt, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I'll talk a little bit about our technology transfer program and our startups and entrepreneurship. First of all, I'll point out that to have any of these programs, you have to have good research, and you have to have a lot of research. We, as a campus, are closing in on about $190 million in research, and that's just the UMass Amherst campus. We have the medical school campus in Worcester and the Lowell campus, which have pretty strong research programs as well. So most universities across the country are doing both traditional licensing of technologies to existing companies, and they're focusing more and more on entrepreneurship, and we are as well. One of the overused terms in the last few years is the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and I prefer to think of what we're doing, at least at UMass, as taking a holistic approach. And by that I mean you look at, as Mary pointed out, the continuum. You're at the very front end with basic research results, and at the other end you're looking at products actually getting on the market through, for example, a startup. But you're also looking at who's doing this, and we have found, I'm sure as Yale has and others, that student entrepreneurship is really a catalyst for entrepreneurship all over campus. Student entrepreneurs are fearless, they'll try anything. They inspire their faculty advisors to get involved in their companies or to start their own. So we look at student and faculty entrepreneurship as a holistic activity that goes hand in hand. Education of both student and faculty entrepreneurs is critical. One thing we have done, and I'm sure a lot of universities have, is we've brought engineering and hard science folks together with people in business school. both for doing the startups and in our teaching. We have our courses are taught team teaching with representatives of both places. Relationships are critical for this sort of thing. We do use our alumni networks very effectively as mentors, as people who are role models, who in some cases will become potential investors or they'll get involved with the startups, and they're always happy to help. One other thing that I think in terms of thinking the continuum, you have to look at the continuum of a startup. So we've tried to set up funding programs that go from gap funding, where you're just trying to move some basic technology further along to show proof of principle or to create a prototype. And then we have funds for, which we'll get into a little later, but for every step of the way there's some funding that will help a startup get launched. So, and I'll just say that lacking in our ecosystem, our holistic arrangement is we need to better coordinate the activities that are going on at the campus and in the system, because there may be 10 people working on startups, but are they working together? Are we duplicating effort? We lack a incubator facility in Amherst area for high-tech startups or low-tech startups. And finally, we can always use more money for supporting gap funding and things like that. So that's a quick overview.
Thanks. My name is Kimberly Miller. I'm part of the venture team at Yale. And ventures at Yale are separated into two separate groups. We have the Office of Cooperative Research, which is the tech transfer arm of the university. That is where all of our faculty innovations come out of. And historically, we've produced 50 companies out of OCR that have raised about $1 billion in financing, primarily in the pharma, biotech, and life sciences area. I think the interesting thing that's happening at Yale right now is we're seeing a change in focus. Pharma will always be important, but now what we're seeing is a lot more new venture activity coming out of engineering, computer science, forestry, areas that had traditionally not been a strong area of focus at Yale. Predominantly because I think of the change in funding that's occurred over the past couple of years. Those are areas that are lower to revenue, quicker to revenue, lower cost of investment. So that's an interesting change that we've been seeing on the faculty side. In addition, we have the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. The Yale Entrepreneurial Institute is based on student ventures. It was started in 2007. It's created 50 companies that have raised about $55 million in financing to date. The background on why it was created is there was an article in the Wall Street Journal which showed that Yale students were going to Silicon Valley to start their companies. And President Levin said, we can't have this. Why aren't these students starting their companies here in Connecticut? We have 11,000 students who come to Yale each year, and interestingly, a majority of them do want to get involved in starting a venture. Interesting survey we just did, 1 in 4 Yale College students want to start a venture while in school, and 1 in 5 SOM students want to start a venture while in school. So what can we do to build resources to help them build their companies and build them here and stay here in Connecticut and build this area as well? So that's why the YEI was founded. It started out as a 10-week acceleration program during the summer. They took the 10 best student ventures at Yale. We provide a team of 6 to 7 industry mentors and VCs. We give them some stipend support and venture services and corporate partners through Frank and Jim and others in the room to help support their activities. In addition to the summer fellowship, now what we've been moving into is an academic year acceleration program, so that we're not just in the summer, we're also focusing on starting ventures throughout the academic year. When we think about the ecosystem at Yale, we think about it in a circle. We think there's 3 parts that you really need to get an ecosystem moving, in our opinion. You have to activate the community to be excited about entrepreneurship and give them the tools that they need to start a venture, entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial learning. From there, you hope to activate the best ideas, to accelerate them. That's our acceleration programs. And then finally, the third arm in that is keeping them, rejuvenation.
creating enough activity here in Connecticut that others see it, are inspired by the activity that's happening, and want to start again, where you go right back into activation. So when we think about our programs, that's what we're focusing on: activation, acceleration, and keeping the companies here in Connecticut.
Thanks, Kim. Rob Bettigol, managing partner of Elm Street Ventures. Elm Street has been around, we started in 2006. Funded about half by Yale. No strings attached to the money, but what attracted me to start this fund was the 11,000 students and number of faculty members.
Oh, number of faculty members.
Lots of faculty members doing, and lots and lots of research dollars. When we started out putting the fund together in 2004, really, we closed February of 2006. We focused on life sciences, and we did that because 80% of the research dollars that flow to Yale go into the life sciences, and so no surprise, what came out at the end of the pipeline were inventions in therapeutics, in diagnostics, medical devices, and so on. So I put together a team of people, part-timers. I was at the time the only full-time person. Part-timers, we haven't found the right term yet 6 years later, but think of it as a stable of experienced executives. And they were all from the life sciences side. Since we started, we've invested in 13 companies. Of those, we've co-founded 8 of those companies. That includes one that preceded the fund, but one of our partners had started. So 7 companies that we've co-founded. 9 of those 13 companies are that have some Yale connection, either based on Yale technology or involve some Yale people. And there's been this shift for all kinds of reasons that we could spend a few sessions on, in where the opportunities are, and a lot of it's driven by the capital that's available. But there's been this shift at the university, both in interest on the parts of faculty members and students, but also a growing ecosystem. It's hard to avoid the term in New Haven that makes it more attractive to start and run businesses. And it's outside of Yale, which is really great to see. There's an event called Startup Weekend, which is the weekend of November 10th and 11th, which is really a community event. There'll be some Yale people participating. But there's an excitement level. The activation, I think of it as, you got to have a lot of good coffee shops with great espresso. And Elm Street started really in one of the coffee shops in New Haven, which, as it turns out, our office is right next door to it, so I'm still patronizing it. But what we do primarily with the 7 companies we've started since we got formed is, in large part, we work closely with Yale, with Kim and her colleagues at the Office of Cooperative Research. And I can give an example of that. We started a company called P2 Science last November, but it was about 3 years in the making, from first meeting the Yale professor, Paul Anastas, meeting his then first-year PhD student who was working on an interesting class of chemicals, surfactants. And it took a while for things to kind of percolate up. But we found a manager, 20 years of experience in the field of taking oleochemicals and making specialty products from them, and started this company up. And within a few months, they had changed the business focus to something bigger and more exciting. But Kim's on the board. We have, we start these things. We have an ongoing relationship with Yale. There's always an interesting piece of it, which I'm sure we'll talk about tonight, which is the negotiation of the license. And that's kind of when we're on. It's probably like this, sort of on sides of the table, not across the table exactly, because we do have the same goal to get businesses started. And we share a goal of seeing businesses start and remain in New Haven. It's good for our business. We need a vibrant ecosystem. And most importantly, we need to recycle people, because shorter in supply than capital in New Haven and Connecticut are experienced CEOs, people that have run startups, run businesses before. And so we think about what we're doing with our companies that start with more seasoned people, and the companies we've been investing in out of the YEI program. We've invested in one student venture so far, and are close to doing several others. That those people are going to grow up in these businesses and remain in the area and start other businesses after the current ones.
All right, thanks everyone. So I heard lot of great terminology, and I'm glad because it matched my notes. So I'm sure I'm on target. I heard relationships, I heard activation, I heard funding, alumni, students. And so the first topic I had on my list to talk about was relationships. And so as I was reading up on topics to talk about today, I read an article that the chancellor of UC Davis, so the University of California System, top 5 tech transfer program in the country. And she spoke about the new innovation ecosystem. I'm sorry, Fred, that word's going to be around a lot today. So, and she said it focuses on translational research and building relationships. And she spoke about how important relationship building and long-term relationship building is with industry, and how critical it is to take that basic research out of university structure and bring it eventually into the community and into industry. So what I'd like to do is, and I'm going to drop a topic and I want you to debate it and talk about it, is how are your programs currently building those long-term relationships? What are you doing currently, and how do you see future relationship building programs kind of building within each of your programs? And Mary, I'll ask you to kind of start us off.
Today, I think I met with 4 different companies. It's wonderful to have a situation where even though we're looking at federal funding, declining federal funding for our research, it also is an opportunity because the businesses, the industries are interested in having relationships with a university. They are looking at ways that they can work with us, whether it's for their specific one initial issue that they have, or working with us on going together for grants. And as what I said, and then from the university's perspective, because we're aware of what's probably going to be happening with federal funding, university professors who perhaps had never really thought of industry as a partner and are now looking at it and wanting to have the relationships. And so oftentimes what we can do, at least from our perspective in the technology commercialization, is that many times scientists already know each other, and industrial scientists, people in industry, people in university already know one another. And so what we try to do is, I hate to say it, but we try to put that ecosystem together. We try to ensure that we have good IP policies and that we're able to build upon the relationship. I mean, I myself used to be a researcher, and I would sometimes be kind of afraid of involving my commercialization office into that relationship because I didn't want them to mess anything up, you know. And so we're, as the people that are involved in commercialization, we're aware of that, and we try to make IP easier. We try to bring new industry. Oftentimes today, the industries I met with, they came for one reason, but we were able to connect them with other researchers at the university because, again, we were building that relationship.
I think tech transfer offices know that the key relationship is between the scientist at your university and the scientist at the company. Sometimes the scientist at the company was a former grad student of your researcher. But we make extra effort to protect that relationship. So in other words, we will never bring our faculty into a negotiation with a company. We keep them in the background, we keep them informed, but we protect that relationship. They're always going to be on a positive footing with them. Another thing I'll mention that we're doing at UMass is creating what's called the University of Massachusetts Innovation Institute, UMII, which is it's not, we decided it's not rocket science to work with industry, but there's some things that you need to do that make it go quicker and more smoothly and enhance your reputation as a university that industry wants to work with. So, for example, we now have one door that industry can go through for sponsored research deals. We have streamlined the process for getting those deals done, and we've done a few other things that just make the whole thing more efficient, because we try to work on company time, not university time. So I think some of it is simply just common sense communication and looking at what the other party needs to have and making sure you can provide that.
So, I think that the industry relationship with academia is a really important one. And the issue that always comes up is how do you streamline the process and how do you make the IP process easier? It's one that we grapple with when we're thinking about industry. Because one of the questions that I had for both Mary and Fred, just from a learning perspective, is, are you using template agreements to try and streamline that process? How is that process made easier for industry as opposed to, some other deal that you might do? Is it template agreements? How is that working?
I would say one of the things we're doing is that we have a team. First of all, we try to make what we're doing transparent to the company. They don't know why it got done so quickly. We know why it did, because we're working in the background with a team of people who have committed themselves to a quicker turnaround for these things. I would love to say that there's a template agreement you can use. I don't think that's the case. We do try to do some master research agreements with some key companies. Those are good. They take a long time to negotiate, and then you sort of push the details of each project into an attachment to that master agreement. But you'll probably find that you're going to modify that master research agreement anyway.
One of the philosophies that we're taking into the conversation, and the technology people who are out there actually negotiating those licenses are here in the audience, so I hope they agree with this, but what we're doing is, instead of going into an agreement and saying, what can I protect? We're trying to go into those agreements and say, how can we make this work? And that's a very significant change for many universities, and I think perhaps it's a change for UConn over the last few years too. And so it's like, okay, we want to walk away that everybody sees this as a success and that we've developed that relationship.
I guess just following on with the question, the translational gap question, which was also part of the issue that was raised. I mean, I think that's a huge issue that we face at the universities. We're at the basic research level, and the research that we produce isn't ready for prime time. It's not ready for industry. It's not even ready for venture capital to come in many circumstances. So the issues that we always face is, how do we traverse that? What are the mechanisms that we have in place to try and provide funding for the translational gap issue? And then subsequent to that, I don't think it's just a funding issue. If you merely provide money to the translational gap, studies have shown that that's not effective in creating more companies or having greater output. The relationships come in. Unless you have money tied with industry relationships, VC relationships, mentoring relationships, that's the key, in my opinion, to creating an environment that's ripe for commercialization, both on the new venture side and the licensing side. And so I guess my question would be for the translational funding. We don't have any at Yale. We don't have translational funding. So are there different translational funding opportunities available at the other universities?
Well, there is this CTSA, the Clinical Translational Research Awards, and I think there's probably 30 universities that have those. We have one at UMass Medical Center in Worcester. I think the jury's still out as to whether those have really moved things along, but it's a tough problem because everybody knows what has to happen next, and the federal agencies will not fund that kind of work. You can start a company and go after SBIR, STTR funding. That's one way of doing it, but that doesn't always fit what you need.
If the goal is to start a business, I think there's a missing ingredient doing that way. You need good science, and it needs to be brought along from basic research to through translation to products that can be used in the real world. You need money, you need management, but you need this passion piece, because starting companies is really hard, and somebody has to care to get through all the crap to make it happen, to get through all the downturns. Most companies barely make it at some point. They're scraping the bottom and they come back up. And so a number of the companies that we've started around Yale research came up. What came along with them was a passionate either postdoc or PhD student. And I think, and I can think of some other Yale Yale scientists are working on startups, and they've got a postdoc. One of the things that the professors really care that their postdocs find good positions, and if there happens to be a piece of research that they think could end up in a startup, they'd love to see their postdoc part of it. So there's a lot of pieces of that, and I think finding a way to encourage that, to keep postdoc around, wouldn't take a lot of money, while in addition to some of the translational funding, that can make a difference in getting a company.
Hey, Rob, that's a good transition point, because one of the other areas I wanted to talk about was the environment of entrepreneurship, and I know I think Kim mentioned it, I think most of you mentioned it. And as we talk about the new ecosystem and the new way of doing things, students and faculty continue to get brought up as a key component in creating, but more importantly, sustaining, Rob, what you talked about, this environment of entrepreneurship to surround not just the university, but the region behind around the universities. Can we talk about specifically some programs that you're talking about, what Rob is talking about, which you're engaging faculty, you're engaging students, and how you're seeing that benefit now? I mean, some of those programs are earlier on than others, but I know Kim's program's been around for a longer time, and the one, Mary, that you spoke about at UConn is a little earlier on, and I'd love to start comparing what you're seeing, Mary, with what you're seeing, Kim, in the development of programs, and Fred, obviously, interject as well. So, Kim, why don't you start us off?
So one of our newest initiatives for starting new companies around both students and faculty is a program that we call the Emerging Entrepreneurs Program. And that program was started when we started focusing more on the engineering and computer science side. We had a lot of interesting research that we thought had new venture potential, but our networks weren't developed in those areas. We didn't know the entrepreneurs in those areas to start those companies. So we took a look in our backyard at the School of Management, and lo and behold, we found a whole student body with technical backgrounds, graduate degrees. They've started businesses before. They've started successful businesses before. They've raised money. So we started to experiment with, what if we took these students and matched them with university professors as a way of starting those very early stage companies as a new way to try and traverse that translational gap, to try and drive some funding into these companies. So we started that program in 2010. The first year we had a pilot. We did 3 companies. One of computer science. We had a guy from MIT at the business school, software background, started 3 companies before. We matched him up with a guy from the Daniel Abadi, a star from our computer science department, and we started a company called Adapt. They went through the YEI Summer Fellowship program. They raised $1.5 million after that, and then went on to raise $10.5 from Bessemer and Norwest. So that is our proof of concept. We thought, hey, is there something here? Can we do this again? Can we replicate it? And so we in fact have. We've done 6 of them so far, and of the 6, a majority of them have gone on to raise financing, whether equity or non-dilutive financing. And interestingly, though, the challenge that we have with these companies is trying to keep them here. We're finding Adapt we thought that was going to be the next little cluster we were going to create in computer science in New Haven. And much to our dismay, the venture capitalists came in, swoop it, took it to Massachusetts. And so the issue that we're thinking about with our, sorry Fred. So what we think about with our student companies is how do we create an environment here that we don't keep creating these companies that raise money and then ultimately just leave the state. But that's the state that we're in right now.
I was going to say, statistically, the recent surveys on startups out of universities that are, let's say, based on the university-owned technology started by faculty, 2.6.
If they're connected to their mentors and their mentors are connecting with them and working with them, that really enhances the both the success of the business as well as the kind of the stickiness of staying in that region. And then looking at what are the other impediments there, what do they need, and how do we connect them with that piece.
Kim, can I ask a quick question? Based on the YEI model, because it's been relatively successful, I think, in Yale, I mean, are there best practices that you've learned through the process that can kind of be shared with other universities as to what worked, what didn't work, and what you find being the most, I guess, facilitating factor of getting your students interested and working through the program so successfully?
Sure. I think from our perspective, and Mary just touched on this, I think one of the really important parts of starting these new ventures is really giving them that mentor and advisory support. These are young companies, and to the extent that you can pair that with people who have industry experience, who've been there, done that, I think that's crucial to their success. And I don't think that's unique to just the university setting. Techstars, Y Combinator, they'll also tell you that that's a very, very important part of their success. And so our mentor network today consists mostly of people in this region, New Haven predominantly, New York and Boston. But what we're looking to do now is expand that network and include people from all over the country that have domain expertise that can help advise these companies. It raises a risk, though, because to Mary's point, does that make them more likely to flee? Or are you just trying to build a successful company and advise it in the best way possible? So I think having a very strong mentor core is important. And I think having access to funding is another hugely important part of this equation. These companies are early stage. They're not venture capital ready. In our case, they're typically not. And what we utilize in large part, we have benefit from Rob being close by, but our alumni network is very important. So we have alumni who we refer to as our brave angels. They come in and play at that very, very early stage. It's very, very risky, and they will come in and help seed those companies to get them to the point where then the venture capitalists will come in and look at them. So mentors and access to very risky, early stage capital, I would say.
Rob, you had a point to make? I'm sorry, I might have cut you off there.
Well, I was going to a little bit of a tangent, but I think an important one, and that's kind of a sense of urgency about making things happen now. After the first summer of YEI, I've been on the board since the beginning. After the first summer, there were no SOM students involved. None of them had any business ideas. They were all, this was 2007, they were all still going off to consulting jobs and investment banking internships and so on in the summer. Roll the clock forward 4 years, I think a couple summers ago, there's an orientation session in the end of August when the first year students come in, and almost the entire class showed up for the entrepreneurship section. And they're really eager now to do it, and a lot of, some of that's the economy, but we can hook people now. Hopefully the economy won't stay down forever, and people, the high-paying summer internship jobs and full-time jobs are going to return. And this is the time when we can get the best and the brightest to focus on starting companies, and that can become self-perpetuating. But I think we shouldn't. Yes, it's going to take 20 years to build the equivalent of San Francisco in Connecticut, but we don't really have 20 years to get us started. We need to come at it with some sense of urgency.
I have a quick question. How do you go about identifying resources, people outside the School of Management that perhaps can assist and help a company, and how do you bring that ecosystem together so that you have an engineer, a person who's working in a medical technology, and a management person together? How do you develop those cross-disciplinary teams?
Sure. I think that YEI at Yale is serving as the hub. So the people who are interested in entrepreneurship, typically the entrepreneurial centers are focused with either the business school or the engineering school. One of the interesting parts about YEI is that it came out of the tech transfer office, which typically they did not. And I think as a result of that, it didn't have any tie to any school. So as a result, anybody that was interested in entrepreneurship started to funnel towards this little hub that was started to develop. And so I think that was a really important ingredient in the puzzle, because then you did have your engineers who are interested in new ventures coming to say, hey, I'm not a founder, but I want to get involved. You had your School of Management students who were coming who didn't have an idea, but wanted to lead a company. And then you have your idea people. Yale College, they come up with these brilliant ideas. They don't necessarily, are able to execute on them, but all together, you have an interesting combination. And then you have people like Rob who come, and once we bring these together, Rob and some of our network in the other areas bring in experience management that can help. So our Yale alumni network then helps at the next level once we've created those teams.
I talk about this. You have a formal process.
The mentor process. Yeah, so as part of why we have Wes Bray, who is a Yale alum, serial entrepreneur, started 5 different companies in the web mobile space. We're fortunate to have him with us 3 days a week. And he is working on the YI Mentor Network. That's a group of 100 people, relatively local in this area, Yale alums, friends of Yale, experienced CEOs, venture capitalists, who devote a tremendous amount of time to getting these companies started. These mentors in the past have typically been devoted to the summer fellows, those 10 stars that we consider for the summer program. We put a team of 5 to 6 of them around each venture. The mentor network is expanding, as is the number of students who need help. So now we're starting to incorporate mentors into our academic year programs. So if we have a venture creation program, it's called Very Early Stage Companies. They don't know if they have anything yet, but they look like they have an interesting idea. We give them a little bit of seed capital, a mentor, and the goal is drive to go, no go. Create a quick prototype, get it out to the market, see if anyone cares. So that's another way that we utilize our mentor network now.
Is the ability to fund at the university level something that's consistent? So Kim, I heard you say there is some funding opportunities at Yale, or the program will provide certain ventures. Is that consistent, Fred, with what's going on at UMass and with what's going on at UConn?
Do you mean direct funds into the company, the startups?
Yeah, that's right.
It's critical, and a lot of schools have decided to embrace it, although it takes a little bit of getting used to. In Massachusetts, I don't know if you were around 15 years ago when Boston University invested 80 million, I think, in Saragen, and then it went bankrupt. We don't want to see that happen again, but I think you're seeing a lot of schools create seed funds. I have a little brochure on one that we're in the middle of creating. I'll just say the interesting thing is that we started out saying, okay, are we going to bring in people who want to do this as an investment, or are we going to bring in people who want to do it as a donation? And it's tricky if you have a seed fund that will use money from both types of sources. What we found is that we're going to be better off and more successful doing it as a donation.
We have a entity called UConn R&D Corporation, which just changed its name to UConn Ventures about a couple of weeks ago, so you'll probably hear it being called both. But that is the ability to take companies and spin them off with either technology or ideas that come from UConn faculty and students. And they've been involved with about 20 different companies. They recently spun off one called Ronzulli Learning, which was some technology and intellectual property that came from there. But they're able to provide just exactly what we're talking about, which is that missing first money to help both put that together, as well as they're very engaged and involved in helping find management so that these companies can be successful. So it's one where it also takes a long view if you're looking at that. So that this has been around for about 8 years now, and we're beginning to see some successes and companies and spin-offs that have come. But that's a very crucial part of that, again, that continuum, what we're talking about, how we can help companies from idea all the way through to successful launching of a firm.
I think there's a challenge here, and Fred, if you've got a seed fund starting up, maybe you could respond to this. There's this kind of fine line, maybe it's not so fine, this gray area between saying, okay, we're going to fund the top, we're going to have kind of a competition, and we're going to fund the top 5, regardless of what they are. Which would be kind of the way things work when money is donated. Yale had something called the Y50K competition. It was $50,000. It was a big business plan competition, and people got real money towards starting their businesses. But the money was donated, and it got given out regardless. The flip side of that is private capital, or whether it's donated or whether it's decided on by professionals, looking at does this business have merit? Is it going to succeed? Because otherwise, it's an educational experience for the students, but if it's a business that's not going to make it once the life support's removed, what's that point?
So I can comment on that. So with our seed fund, and we also have another fund called the co-investment fund that can invest up to $4 million a year in various entities. None of these investments can be made without the approval of outside professional investor advisors, and ideally with co-investment by professional investors. Anything short of that becomes political and, in my opinion, foolish. I think you're going to waste a lot of money. And you know, the idea of our co-investment fund, for example, is that we have a couple things in the pipeline that we think will pan out and really show some heavy returns on a $500,000 investment. Well, when that happens, you're going to find it easier to get the university to put forward more money to build a bigger fund. So if you don't have the right criteria for investing in the right entities, then you're going to lose. You should tap into outside expertise, and there's lots of it around that would help, either just pro bono as an alumnus or, you know, as co-investor.
Okay, so we have about, Mary, did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
I just actually wanted to ask our panelists here. We are having conversations with a number of our alumni that are interested in creating basically an alumni angel fund. That conversation's happening. Do you have those in place right now at your institutions?
Well, a number of our limited partners are alumni, and I'm sure some of them invested to be supportive of Yale. They'd also like to make a return on their investment.
So we have about 10 minutes left, but I want one more topic before, and then we'll have a little bit of time for any questions from the audience. But it's collaboration, and so a couple of weeks ago, the state legislative body here and the lawmakers got an update on the Jackson Labs initiative, which is scheduled to open, I believe, in 2014. And part of that hearing, which struck me, is lawmakers heard from researchers at Yale, they heard from researchers at Wesleyan, they heard from researchers at UConn, and it was talking about different projects, originally maybe funded from state capital, which drove into federal capital, which drove into private industry and private funding. And I kept thinking to myself, you know, collaboration among the universities, collaboration among private and public funding is so important, and one of the reasons why the region is investing so heavily in fueling economic growth through the Jackson Labs initiative and other initiatives. How do you, within your university, see this impacting you? Is it based just on research? Do you see more collaboration between the universities happening? Do you see more private funding coming in on public funding? Can you talk more about what that means for you, each of your universities as a whole?
Maybe before the universities, I can just jump in here, because we're fortunate here in Connecticut to have Connecticut Innovations as a partner, and as I'm sure most people know, as you know, legislation passed, I guess a couple of years ago now, CI has an additional $25 million a year. But what it really boils down to in terms of new investment dollars from the main Connecticut Innovations Fund, they were investing at about a $10 to $12 million a year rate before, and now they're double that, $20 to $25 million a year. They've added a lot of people. They're great partners. We're about to go into another deal together. It'll be our sixth or seventh out of 13 or 14 deals. So a great partner. It's a tremendous. There's so little early stage capital around. It's filling an important gap. They don't quite do what we do, which is starting companies, but they're right there. We get them started and they join us.
Just to follow on with Rob's point with respect to Connecticut Innovations, then move into collaboration with the universities. You know, I think at Yale in the past couple of years, almost all of our companies have been started or have some CI money. It is becoming a very crucial part of starting companies here in Connecticut. So I think they are filling a very important void. They have their Tech Start program, which is trying to get more ventures off of the ground as well. And we're very actively collaborating with CI, as I know the other, as UConn is as well. The Tech Start program, we have joined a relationship with them where they utilize our Yale resources. We go back and forth between Yale and C-Tech, and that's proven to be a good partnership. We mix students with their teams to try and help one of our VC classes. We have a team of 5 S1 students who are helping each of the different companies just as a way of collaborating and reaching out. I think with respect to collaborating amongst universities at the venture level, I think we started a little bit. I think there's a ton more that we could do as far as putting putting more ventures together, collaborating, not just at the research stage, but the venture stage too. We each have different little pieces of the puzzle. If we put them together, what kind of companies could we create? And I think that's an area that we'd all like to see improve.
There's a big initiative going on in Massachusetts in Holyoke, and it's called the High Speed Computing Initiative. And it is the result of substantial investment, and I think it's the kind of thing that states need to do, regions need to do, because it does catalyze a lot of interaction and collaboration. I've also seen, I'm a bit of a skeptic, I've seen this attempted in other states where it just turned out to be a total waste of money because it wasn't done right. But I think we're very optimistic that this high-speed computing center and all this initiatives with big data is going to be really moved forward by this thing.
Frank started out the conversation with the importance of relationships, and that's really what it comes down to with both the scientific level and at the industry level. And what you're referring to was the conversations that had happened, but what came out of the stem cell money that had been invested by the state of Connecticut. And as we sat there and listened to the university people, the professors from Wesleyan and Yale, who UConn were all working together on projects. And it's, again, as you talked about, it's a scientist to scientist exist, and what we all need to do is then to help create that ability for them to collaborate, and then to take that money, that state money or that local money, and leverage that with both industry and federal partnerships as we go forward.
Fantastic. So we have a little bit of time for questions, if anyone has questions or questions for the panelists. Anyone? Please stand up if you can.
Sure. I guess the question would be for the state schools. You have multiple campuses. How are you reaching to the other campuses in your school systems? Is there any advantage to doing that? Do companies perceive that as having an advantage, having more resources? Or is it a deterrent where you want to focus your efforts on a single campus with all your researchers and your universities' growth in tech transfer on a campus-by-campus basis?
So did you hear the question? It's really regarding multiple campuses and the coordination of the program?
So at the UMass System with 5 campuses, obviously the more you work together in sensible ways, the better, the more successful you'll be. Each campus might be working on several startups at once, so we do have a centralized coordinating group in the president's office that helps with this, and they can, because they have this critical mass of activity, they can build bigger programs, they can attract people to help out, they can attract more money, so that's always a good idea. We also have, we're like, a small tech transfer office of 6 or 7 people, but when we meet as a group, there's 25 of us. It's like we become one of the larger tech transfer offices in the country that way, so it's sharing information and things. Once in a while we do compete. Amherst competes with Lowell, and we have researchers that say, don't tell Lowell what we're doing. So it's just, that's academic competition.
At UConn, we have most of that coordinated as from a central area, particularly for all of the research that needs to go through just one office of sponsored research and one commercialization. And a couple of our campuses are beginning to have some really strong research expertise, particularly in the marine science area down in Avery Point. And so again, we're a small state. Most of you don't think that, but I know that Frank came from Michigan, and so geographically it makes it easier because we are more coordinated and located. And particularly as we go forward with all of the high computing needs and so forth, there's a reason for us all to work together because we all need those resources together.
Time another question? Does anyone else have a question for panel?
Addressing this continuum, in this continuum, we typically see that we can involve angels before we involve VCs. Rob, can you give us some sort of do's and don'ts as to what and how should we use those angels so that we don't kind of set up the wrong end game for the VC time and place?
Yeah, it's an issue that goes back many years because there's it depends on where you are in the country. I think in the West Coast in San Francisco, the angels and the VCs are a little bit more closely aligned. There's also been a move towards kind of the institutionalization of angel groups. And Liddy can talk about that, the Angel Investor Forum here in Connecticut. But one of the things, it's really a question of alignment of interests. So to us, it kind of depends on who the angels are. If the angels are investing in something, we tend to be more of the software side than on the life sciences side, where they're expecting to invest and be out in a couple of years. We're probably not going to be interested. We want to build companies over the long term. We're not looking for a 50% IRR in 2 weeks, because that doesn't really, it's a great number, but we want to see attractive returns over a long period of time. So we want to build real businesses, and that's probably the biggest difference I see in kind of VC alignment versus angels. And then there's kind of the control issue. It depends on the size and the number of angels that are involved. If there is an angel group and they've organized into an LLC, and so it's a question of getting one signature from an LLC to do things that sometimes things come up and have to be acted on very quickly, as opposed to having 30 or 40 angels that you have to go chase down, and they're on their yachts in the Caribbean. It can be problematic. So those are the things that we look for if we're looking at investing in something with angels, and we've co-invested with angels several times and very successfully. So it's but there's certainly those considerations.
We have time for one more. Okay.
Well, I have a question. Have you all ever sat on a panel together before? Because I just think it's so great to see these institutions working together on entrepreneurship. Does it feel new to any of you to be working closely with other universities?
Well, Kim and I have done this a few times. It's great.
I mean, do you collaborate otherwise on entrepreneurship, or is that kind of a new thing?
We collaborate on other things. Entrepreneurship, we're beginning to. I think and certainly we collaborate on a number of research areas, but in entrepreneurship, I think with the announcement of the new innovation ecosystem that'll be coming, that I think there'll be even more collaboration among at least the Connecticut institutions, and we'll have to find some reason to collaborate with Massachusetts.
We're just 45 minutes away. You can. Well, my experience was more in Michigan, and there was a huge push there to collaborate between the big three of U of M, Michigan State, and Wayne State, and a lot of it was on startups and gap funding, things like that. So it works if it's done properly.
So with that, I'm going to introduce Liddy. Liddy, first off, just a brief round of applause for our panel members.